So yeah, basically I'm kind of just doing these recordings as a way to, just an outlet for myself to, you know, just speak my mind. I've been living in Tokyo now for about 10 years, and so I don't have a lot of as many opportunities. I think as I just don't have that many opportunities to be able to express myself or just kind of speak freely. So I kind of started these just recordings where I just just talk out loud, just to get my thoughts out. And also I feel like there's a lot of interesting things going on in the world right now. A lot of discussion going around it, and just I'd like to add my voice into the discussion. Whether it be a good voice or a bad voice, I guess I don't really care about that. It's just a kind of a therapeutic way to get things off my chest. Is the best way to describe it. Um, and there was like a few, and so right now there's a few interesting things that are going on. Specifically, there's like a lot of interesting things going on, and um, like with um, you know, basically the new incoming administration, and uh, so like I guess I wanted to just like get my thoughts out on two of them. So the first one is the RFK Jr. confirmation hearing, which I thought was really interesting. It was very enlightening to see how um, the politicians. It was interesting to see the theater, the theatrics of it on both sides, where like where they have like what they're kind of angry about or maybe pretending to be angry about. Um, but then you can see like the line of attack they're taking is very much intentional and scripted. And uh, and when it's kind of like pulls back the kind of curtain, and you kind of start to so you start like for at least for me I saw some politicians that I used to kind of respect, and I saw them in a new light, a new kind of ugly light. And to me, I thought it was interesting. And so on that, I when I first heard anything about RFK, I think it was like I was out for dinner with a friend, and he was like, this is like this is like last year, so before the election was really getting started up, and we were talking about like, yeah, who we might vote for this year, and is there any promising candidates, and we both were like, both were of the opinion that Biden probably wasn't going to be able to run, just due to his age and his kind of clear mental decline. And so he mentioned like, well, RFK seems pretty promising. He was at the time he was still the Democratic. He was still running on the Democratic ticket, or trying to run for the Democratic ticket. And I immediately dismissed it because the only thing I'd heard about RFK up until that point was that he was this like kook, kind of like lunatic, anti-vaccine, crazy person that was responsible for measles outbreaks and possibly the deaths of some children. And so I just had this narrative in my head about what he was, and what he was or what he was about, and I didn't realize that narrative was entirely fictional. It was entirely constructed by the by essentially kind of legacy media, or not necessarily not just legacy media, but basically people that wanted to attack him. And so I'm not necessarily in agreement with everything that RFK has said, or everything he's proposing. But when I first like heard him actually like defend himself like in a long form, I was surprised by how lucid he sounded, how reasonable he sounded. And it was like, oh, okay, when you actually look at these things, the nuance of these things, then I think he does start to have some good points. Now, one thing I feel, the one thing I get a sense from him is that he is a person who is almost always going to find the big corruption in something, even if it doesn't exist. And this could be because of his background. Both his uncle and father were murdered, potentially with government involvement. We don't know for sure. his he spent his career on dealing with polluters and dealing with either suing either corrupt officials or corrupt government officials or corrupt business leaders, oftentimes in collusion. So you can get a sense like, oh, so someone with this background is almost always going to see corruption. And I also have heard some people say like, well, he does have like a penchant for kind of exaggerating things. So like when he's talking about a problem, he has a penchant. This is just what I think it was a Rolling Stones journalist that worked with him had said he had a penchant for exaggerating facts or just misremembering facts. And I'm not, so I don't know if that's true per se, but I think if I'm going to summarize the crux of what his argument is, the vaccine skepticism aside, but just the crux of what his argument is, or his proposition essentially, is that well, I think he's like two pillars essentially. So his first pillar is, hey, the vaccine companies are immune from liability, so they can't be sued, right? They are the same companies that have time and time again been caught either cheating on studies or lying about studies, buying off scientists, buying off people to promote their one narrative or another, and they have been, they have killed easily probably over 1 million people. If you just count the opioid epidemic plus, I think there was a heart medication. There was like a heart medication. It was like a headache pill. There was something that they also had that ended up causing a lot of heart attacks, and they were fined billions of dollars, right? So these same companies that do this, and we're somehow assuming that when they are making a product that they are immune from prosecution over, that now they're going to be on the up and up. And he's basically saying that I don't believe that's the case, and it's the responsibility of the regulators to prove that, to ensure that like any product that these companies are putting out is properly tested and in a transparent, and the data is transparent and open, and then everyone can kind of, it's really clear if what's healthy, what's safe, and what's not. And then right now the HHS does not do that. The HHS is missing the mark on that. It's not hitting the bar. And so one of his pillars is to go and get rid of those conflicts of interest and help restore this help restore the health agency to its maybe intended original purpose. And I think that's a very, and I agree with that. And his second pillar is that while infectious diseases are important, and there was a lot of talk about like measles or polio or other infectious diseases that are deadly and do cause a lot of harm, that while these are important, they're not the only problem. Right. So they're not the only problem. The infectious disease, right? His other point is that Americans are Americans' health has been declining for years. It's both metabolic health. So issues with like obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and a host of other related issues has been these issues have been growing steadily, and now they affect a significant portion of Americans, and these issues kill far more people prematurely than infectious diseases. Now it's maybe a little bit it's kind of like the frog boil, like boiling a frog and slowly boiling a frog, right? So like the consequences of a poor metabolic health aren't necessarily something that you would see immediately, and so that's why it's kind of um, hard for us to, or maybe more, it's a more difficult thing to directly tie kind of like healthy lifestyles to these downstream impacts, but they are very real, and I don't think anyone is disputing that this is a major crisis, a major issue. And it's actually something that's interesting because since I live in Japan, when I go back to the U.S. every once in a while, I do. Sometimes it's almost astonishing how unhealthy people look compared to what you might see in Tokyo or in Japan. It's really shocking. It's surprising. I think when I lived in the U.S. Or I grew up in the U.S., I just didn't notice it until I left for a while, and then you got used to kind of what most, maybe you could call it normal, what is maybe a little bit more normal, and then you go back and just the juxtaposition of those two worlds, like the Tokyo world and whatever city I'm visiting in the U.S. world, is really astonishing how unhealthy people look. And then even like friends, like childhood friends that I would meet, they looked, when I met them, it was just surprising, like, wow, how much they've aged compared to myself, right? They look a lot older. They're very overweight, very unhealthy looking, and they're starting to have a host of issues, like long-term health issues. And so basically RFK's second pillar is like, hey, we need to. This is a big crisis, and I think there's there's a line of thinking here that so there's a line of thinking that the issues are outside of individuals' control, that these are genetics, like a genetic issue or some other issue that's leading to let's say obesity or the related health issues. And his point, and I actually completely agree with him, is like this is not a genetic thing, right? Because this is not an issue in Japan, and I don't think like Americans in the last 30 years have somehow evolved into like a new kind of human being compared to the rest of the world. So to me, what's really going on is it's a dietary issue, and there's a toxin, there's an environmental issue, and so that's his second pillar, is that we really need to get to the bottom of this, and we need to it needs to be like all hands on deck. And not just obesity issues, but also, when it comes to figuring out what's going on with some of the mental issues that are happening right now with the autism, etc. It needs to be like an all hands on deck. We leave no stone unturned to find out what's causing these issues. And no, of course, RFK is famously known for one of the stones he's looking at is vaccines, which ruffles a lot of feathers. And I agree. I think he's made some very bold statements in the past. And so, and those bold statements, whether or not they're backed up by fact or not, like I know it's really common to say like, well, this has been studied, it's been proven not to be linked. And he'll say like, well, those studies were compromised, and and he has receipts on why he thinks they're compromised. I actually went and, read a few of the studies that, claim to disprove that there was a link between autism and vaccines. And yeah, they did. They did disprove it, but the scope of the study was very narrow, right? It was like I can't remember the name off my head, but it was something like vaccine. It was like the measles vaccine, like a type of measles vaccine. One dosage was not linked to a rise in autism, something like that. But it doesn't look at like the totality of the schedule, right? Like all 72 vaccines or the timing or a bunch of other things. And I'm, obviously I'm I'm fully vaccinated. I was in the military, so they jab basically everything they can into you when you go overseas. And I don't think I had any issues. Like I'm mentally all there. But the way I think about it is, so RFK did not start this, right? He wasn't the person that like started the vaccine skeptic movement. Right, it was already there, and then they according to him, they asked him to help, and then now he's kind of the face of it. So what started it, in my understanding, is there was like a lot of anecdotal stories of moms who felt that their kids had been vaccine injured. And those now these studies that are disproving the vaccine link to autism were already out there, but clearly those studies were not enough to override the anecdotal stories that moms had. Right. So there's already a distrust in the studies or the state of the science, or the scientists that were telling them that everything was okay. So RFK is a symptom, I think, from this, not the cause of this. And I think, what he should do, and I don't know if this is what he's planning to, but I think the way it should be phrased is like, his job is to go in there and prove that they're safe. And also not just that, but turn over every stone possible to find out what's causing this rise in autism, which is quite scary, right? So not just vaccines, but everything. They need to look at everything. So I hope that's what he does. But but this sort of like nuanced view isn't something that can necessarily be discussed. He doesn't have time to really, didn't really have a chance to lay this out. When being questioned. Well, he did in his opening statements. So basically, I think that's where he's coming from. Now again, there's a lot of people that disagree with his opinions, right? They think the science is settled. They think the obesity issue is not an issue, or maybe they do, but they don't think that they think our current approach is fine. Maybe just give everyone GLP-1s or Ozempic. I mean, or they have other issues with him. So he's made some kind of like what seemingly out there statements about viruses being targeted, that kind of thing. But agree or disagree with his opinions, I think that's essentially what he's trying to say. Now, what I had hoped, what would have been nice is that during the confirmation hearings, the Democrat side would have actually gone ahead and debated him on those points. Like actually had a congenial discussion, like, hey, I think this is what you're saying, honestly thinks what you're saying, and here's why I disagree with you. And if you're going to get my vote to be confirmed, this is what I need. I need some concessions from you. I need you to promise, these things, or I want you to really focus on, I have these other priorities I want you to work on. Because really think about it. This is a lifelong Democrat and a Kennedy, who used to be a darling of the left and is actually going to get an important position in the Trump administration. So if you were Democrats, you would have thought that they would be all over getting him nominated. But actually, to me the interesting theater was they were really just disingenuously going after him to try and derail his nomination. And I'll kind of get to that, why I think they were being disingenuous. So the Democrats kept bringing up that he flip-flopped on abortion, right? Because he said pretty publicly that he thinks women should have a right to choose, even up until the moment of birth. He thinks it's the choice of the mother. Now, I've also I think that he made that statement while running for president, and also within the same time frame, he's also said that personally he feels that as the baby it comes closer to term, then it gets a little bit more. He has more questions. Like maybe the state has more should have more of a say in the life of that child, or protecting the life of that child as they come to term. So he's kind of been, but he's basically pro-choice. He's pro-choice. Now he, in order to get a confirmation, the only way he's going to get a confirmation is if he gets all the Republicans to vote for him. And then many Republicans are staunchly pro-life. And so the Democrats were basically like, well, you flip-flopped on pro-choice, right? And they kept bringing it up, not because they cared about whether or not he was pro-choice or pro-life, And even during the committee, he never actually said he's like pro-life. What he said was, I think every life, every child, every abortion is a tragedy, and we need to do everything we can to reduce abortions, right? And I think that's I think I that's actually my stance as well. I'm not. I think really this should be a choice between the mother. The mother should be the one making these decisions, but it's still a tragedy. It's still a tragedy. And like if the mother's making a choice for choosing an abortion for economic reasons, then that's on us, the state, to figure out what can be done to reduce those issues, reduce those economic burdens of having a child, or support mothers that maybe are having economic issues. If it's for health reasons, that's an obvious answer. But really, maybe it doesn't really matter what the reason is. I mean, it does matter what the reason is, but it definitely still should be the choice of the mother. That's my stance. I think that's basically they tried to put him on the spot of saying he's pro-choice, or at least picking a side. But you can tell, and he was being very lawyerly about his choice of words, because he couldn't lie. Like, he couldn't say like I'm pro-life, because he's clearly stated he's not. But they kept trying to pin him on it, and they're not trying to pin it on it because they want him. They want an answer. They're not trying to pin it on it because they care. They're just trying to pin it on it because if he actually misspeaks and says I'm pro-choice, then he just loses one or two of the Republican votes, and he loses the confirmation, right? So, to me, that was just very disingenuous on the Democrat side to go after him for that. And then the second thing that I felt was quite disingenuous was basically they just kept bringing up, like, they would attack him. They would kind of throw out three misquotes, or they would take out three. They would attack him on three things or four things, and they would ask him a question on five. And so already he's like, hey, I need to defend myself on the stuff you already just said. And then you ask me a ridiculous question that I can't answer. So another question he was that Bernie kept asking is like, what about, do you agree that we should have healthcare as a right, healthcare for all? Again, he's not, that's not his job. His job at HHS is to administer, Medicare and Medicaid, and to, administer the various agencies under the HHS. His job is not, that's Congress's job. So, the only reason why Bernie's asking him to try and get a yes or no answer on that is because, again, if he comes out with a firm no, it doesn't sound like he actually believes that. He probably does believe that healthcare should be something that is provided for everyone. So they're gonna, and if he comes out with a no, they're like, well, here's in your book you said the opposite. But if he says yes, then again that's probably going to derail some of his votes. So again, Bernie's or the Democrats are asking him these questions not with the intent to act that they actually care about the answer, or that it's even relevant to the HHS, the head of HHS. They're just trying to ask him these questions as political theater to try and derail his nomination. And to me, I just felt that was very sad and very disingenuous, because this was a chance for both sides to come together and actually have a meaningful discussion on what the health priorities, what the priorities of the HHS should be under the new term. And also, I do get the feeling that Kennedy is willing to work with both sides, very congenial person to work with on both sides. So that's my thought on the RFK thing. That it just felt really disingenuous, and I was really disappointed in Bernie Sanders, the way he treated RFK, and actually, so here's something I was really disappointed in Bernie Sanders on, is so RFK has been this has been his topic for decades, I think. I haven't followed him that long, but he's been on this like environmental and health issues, like for basically most of his kind of like most of his adult life. This is what he's been doing. And then last, but the thing is, the crowd that followed, that went at that was backing RFK. I think there's probably a big overlap between that crowd and the crowd that had followed Bernie when Bernie was running. And I think Bernie was jealous that RFK took his crowd, actually. And like I don't know what's going on in his head, but that's just my opinion of it. That's just like what I see. And the reason I'm saying this is because he had, like, after the election, I saw Bernie coming out on Twitter and and then also holding his own hearings on health issues. And it was almost like he was trying to steal that issue from RFK. He was trying to make it his own issue. And then he was going to try and, so I think what Bernie, but it was, he did it for he did like a few tweets and a few hearings, like a few press junctions. So you can tell like what he's trying to do is like take the health issue, and then he was going to use that hearing to destroy RFK. So basically Bernie was trying to take that issue for himself, even though this hasn't healthcare is a thing where he's been talking about healthcare as a human right, trying to get universal healthcare. He's talking about that. He has really not said anything about these larger issues such as like chronic disease and unhealthy foods and like health guidelines that make no sense, right? He's had nothing to say about any of that that I'm aware of. And all of a sudden he's trying to take on that issue, and I think he's doing it because he thinks he needs to do that to get his constituency back that have left him for RFK essentially. So I think that's what he's trying to do. It was really just disingenuous. Yeah, I don't think Bernie really gives a shit, to be honest, about the issue. I think he just is using it to get his constituency back. It really did kind of open my eyes a little bit and I just did lose quite a bit of respect for Bernie. Now, I feel like if he had just come out and been respectfully critical of RFK, and then they would have had a discussion about their disagreements, maybe we would have agreed to disagree. Then there could have been something constructive, but they just turned it into a show, and it's just really disappointing. So that's one kind of crazy thing that's going on. And the next thing that I think is quite fascinating, and I'm still not sure I have enough it's just this information. Everything's coming out so fast. You don't even know where to have a stance on it is. Or you don't even know where, what you should think about it. And that's basically this Department of Government Efficiency, this team that Elon Musk is using to gain access to these various agencies. Look through their budget outlays and try to identify potential egregious spend, kind of potentially egregious waste of money, or incompetence. And I'm actually for something like that. I'm for that type of an audit. Now, there already is a mechanism in place in the government for this kind of thing. It's called the Inspector General's office. But typically it doesn't work, right? The Inspector General will go in, do an audit, write a report, and then it'll go before Congress. Maybe it'll be in the news cycle for a few days about what they found, and then nothing will change, nothing will happen. So I am kind of in favor of someone going through the books, and doing it in a way that's just open the books, let us see everything, and then we're gonna go line by line and we're gonna sort this out. It kind of reminds me, the way I see it is a lot, and I did work in DC for a little bit, so I kind of am familiar with the people that work there. And I want to preface this by saying that when I was working in there, I worked with some very smart, intelligent, thoughtful, and caring people. I was very impressed actually with the quality, the level that of individuals that I worked with when I was working in DC. And I worked at a number of agencies. I worked at I was a contractor basically. So I was working as a consultant. So I was doing work for the CFTC, the SEC, um, and the IRS and the Veterans Affairs. So yeah, kind of got to see a little bit about how each of these agencies run. And I was really quite impressed with the caliber of people that were working there. But there was also there was a lot of incompetence as well, just like any large organization that's going to exist. But there was also like kind of really like dumb bureaucratic processes that really inflated the cost of things. So yeah, that's just my impression of it. So let's kind of see what comes out. Like I'm kind of interested to see what they find as they go through the books on some of these. But yeah, so generally speaking, I'm for it. But one thing I'm not for is actually I'm not for Elon Musk doing this. And it's not because I don't think he's a smart person or I don't think he's capable of doing it. The way my image of this is sort of like, I don't know if you remember in high school, the class president race and the secretary, right? And it's like everyone that was trying to run to be class president was a loser, right? Like no one respected the class president. And the way I feel like what's happened is everyone who's like competent and good at, like a lot of people that are competent go into the private sector, they go into do their own thing, and then somehow those kind of idiot high school class presidents, they kept going, right? And then now they're the president, or now they're in Congress, or now they're heading up an agency, and and they're because they're incompetent, and regardless of what party they're from, just because they're incompetent, they run things poorly. And so when you get some, like when things get run now, generally speaking, it doesn't affect, even if government is run poorly, it doesn't affect our day-to-day that much. But once it does, maybe it affects someone so much that you get an actual competent person to come into the building and be like, hey, what's going on here? Like what the hell, guys? Like this is like what the fuck? You're spending money on this? Why do And I had a lot of moments of that when I was working when I was consulting. I had a lot of moments where of that type of like idiocy, you could argue. And I'll talk about one later. But I do think that Musk's, he has clear conflicts of interest, right? He runs 2 massive companies, 3, right? He runs Twitter, he runs Tesla, he runs SpaceX. SpaceX is a clear conflict of interest because it's space, right? Like it's basically right now, a lot of it is government contracts. And I think they should find someone else to do it, or he should step down. I think he should step down from it. Maybe he can, they hire people. But to me, I feel like even if he's capable of doing it and capable of doing a good job at finding the corruption, I think there's probably other people that are also capable of doing it, and I think he should step down and let someone else do it. That's my opinion. Because what's happening is that they're actually finding stuff, right? They're actually finding pretty egregious stuff, like we're spending money for Sesame Street in Iraq, or we're spending money for like interpretive dance classes. I don't know if that's actually true, but that's what they're saying. Or a lot of money is being paid for Politico subscriptions, which we can get to that later about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But the issue is because he's attached to it, and the way he goes about it, his approach to things is it's kind of giving people an excuse to go to lose their minds, and. So yeah, I'm a little bit. To me, I feel like maybe he's not the best person to do this. Maybe, maybe he should step aside and let someone else do this, and let them do it in a way that's, maybe going to be as effective, but kind of give, kind of like take away some of the fuel that is being provided. Now, one thing that's a little bit of one thing that I think is important to just caveat is a lot of these, like the hysteria that's going on about his what he's doing. It seems like it's artificially generated hysteria. That's what it seems to me. It's the same thing they did with RFK. It's the same thing they did with Trump. Is they're basically again the legacy media is again taking, like, misinterpreting things, taking things out of context, running with it to some crazy conclusion, and then whipping up a hysteria among everyone based on just these false and misleading statements and facts. So a good example of this is they're saying, like, oh, Musk is going in there with this like team they're not government employees. They're just like plugging in into the database. They're into the payment system. They could break everything. People are gonna die because of this. That's what they're saying. I thought that's what maybe Musk would do that, right? This seems like in character from, right? But then it turns out no, actually these are actually Treasury Department employees. They were hired. They've already been hired. They've already been vetted. They've already gone through their security clearances. And then when you work in the government, once you do have that clearance, of course you have access to those systems. That's what you need to do your job, right? And the only access they have is read access. And the news is intentionally not mentioning this, right? The news is saying that they're actually editing stuff, but apparently that's not what they have. They have read access, and they've been granted access, I guess, by the Treasury Secretary, maybe acting Treasury Secretary, but they're through the proper channels, granted access, read access to go line by line and see if they can identify, spending outlays that are not mandated as a part of their, they're not part of their mandate by Congress. That might be, areas that could be cut. And that seems very reasonable to me. I think that's sort of what people voted for. That's definitely what Trump ran on. So to me, I feel like that seems very reasonable if it's true, right? I mean, maybe it's not. Maybe Musk actually is going wild, and there's some concern there, but that's not what the Treasury Secretary said, and that's not what Musk has said. Now Musk isn't doing himself any favors, right? Because again, what I think is happening is they have some pretty good engineers. They're going through the databases. They wrote a few outlier detection scripts or some few LLM based models to identify potential egregious outlays, and then they're flagging them for review. And then the administrator, or maybe even Trump himself, will look at them. And then if they do determine that these are not the best use of our taxpayer dollars and they're legally able to, they can cut them, right? But he's not actually doing any cutting himself. However, when he goes on Twitter and he's like posting a screenshot of all this money going to a Lutheran group that does helps out with homes for refugees, that kind of thing. And it says like delete, right? But he's not deleting it, right? But it's just the way he talks, I think. And then when the news is sort of disingenuously taking that and using that as the evidence they need to say that Musk is going in there and running amok. So in a way, it's kind of like Musk isn't really doing himself any favors. But again, it's just it's not the news is not doing it. Like the legacy media is basically just, they don't give a shit about whether it's true or not. They just need something that they can use to try and discredit him and to whip up a frenzy to attack him. Yeah. And then I was also interested too, because you saw a lot of like, not just Democrats, but you saw a lot of kind of Congress people, coming out to defend, for example, USAID. And to me, I think the problem is like, if he's actually finding a lot of stuff, now the narrative isn't like, hey, why is the USAID funding all this crazy stuff and kind of probably corrupt? It looks corrupt to me. If you just look at the line items that they're actually funding. So the conversation is like, whoa, why? How are they funding this stuff? How are they getting away with this? And this isn't what, and I don't think a lot of people say that this isn't what we wanted our government to be doing. Instead, the conversation is just all about the personalities of Musk. And I feel like that's a problem. I don't like to me. I feel like there's just like I think legacy media is really just doing everyone a disservice by kind of throwing up these distractions and basically just focusing on these like personality traits of individual employees or cult of Musk's personality, and instead of just looking at what's actually happening and discussing what's actually happening. To me, I feel like that's just really unfortunate. Yeah. Anyway, yeah, that's my voice. That's my opinion on these things. I don't know if they're good takes or not, but take it as it is. And yeah, like hopefully everything's gonna be fine. But yeah, that's all I have. That's all I have on these topics today, and we'll see about how things go next week.